Hey guys, welcome to the Fine Film Podcast. I'm your host, Sin Jurich. Today we have a very special guest on the podcast. His name is Donald Mowat. He's an Academy Award nominated makeup artist that's worked in the industry for close to about 40 years. He's a frequent collaborator with Denis Villeneuve. He's worked on huge projects in movies such as Sicario, Prisoners, Blade Runner, Dune. It's a really interesting talk. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you do, give us a follow on Instagram and hit that subscribe button for more content like this.
Hello.
Hey, Donald, how's it going?
Very well. How are you? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit late.
Nah, not at all, not at all. I'm good. I'm good. How are you? How's Los Angeles at the moment?
Well, it's very odd. The weather, I don't know if you've read, we've had very, very strange weather here. It's cold today, but not raining and the houses aren't falling off mountains, but it's all right. How are you? Where are you?
I'm in Melbourne, Australia. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very
It's unusual for Los Angeles to be going through that kind of weather lately. Things are changing.
It's really, yeah. I mean, usually it's rainy in the winter a little bit, but this has been very unusual. But having been raised in Canada, it makes me laugh a little bit when people, anyway, makes me laugh a little bit when people talk about the extreme cold here. But I was raised in Montreal, so I never felt cold until I came to Los Angeles. But anyway, let's get on with it. Nice to meet you.
Nice for having you. Thank you for coming on. For the listeners, if they're just a little bit of an introduction to you. So today's podcast we have Donald Mowat. I hope I'm saying that right.
Yes.
He's a makeup artist. He's worked in the film industry for, I would say, over 30 years. Is that about right?
Yeah, very close to 40. I'm afraid to say.
Very close to 40. Yeah. So Donald, you've worked on a huge list of huge Hollywood productions. Well, films like Dune, Blade Runner, Sicario, Prisoners, the list goes on really. Multiple awards as well, an Academy Award nomination as well for Dune for makeup. Again, thank you for joining me. It's really a pleasure to talk to someone at your caliber as well. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to maybe start it up. I guess a lot of our listeners, they're big movie fans, enjoy movies a lot. But they might not understand all the little things that go into a film and what makes a film work and all the different departments that kind of work within a film. So I wanted to maybe get a bit of an explain of what is your role as a makeup artist within the film industry, and kind of, what does the role kind of entail for you?
There's so many pieces of a puzzle, really, and I think people now know far more about all the crafts and disciplines today than they used to. But I think it's a very, well, we all think what we do is the most important thing in a film. That's got to be said. I think when I think back, is certainly when I started, I mean, the key elements of the visuals of a film are obviously first and foremost the cinematography, the production design, the costume design, the art direction, the makeup design. I mean, it's kind of it's everything you're seeing. And I think the audiences really know all of that. I think they do get it. I think that cinephiles and people who love films, it surprises me because when I first started, I remember living in London when I was sort of a kid. I mean, staying with my great aunt Peggy in North London. And I remember when I first started working in film and television, when I went back to see her, and I'd already started in production. Maybe I was, 21 or 22, and I'd gone to see her, and we were watching a film, and she said, "Oh, so you do that, like when the person is bleeding or something?" And she was an old lady who, never went to the films, but she knew. I don't think they knew the extent of it, but I think the craft of her mom, up in Scotland, had been a dressmaker, so they clearly knew what went into making a costume. I think that people who are craftspeople and artisans and tradespeople who do costume and people who make wigs and people who make things actually have a far better understanding of what people behind the scenes do, probably greater than we know, you or I, and actually more so than what actors do, and maybe musicians, or, well, maybe not. I can't say that for musicians, but I think I just think people do know, because when they see things being made and how people draw or sculpt is actually quite relatable.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot more appreciation, kind of what goes into the film. I know for myself, like years ago, even realizing how much of a difference a score in a film makes, and then, you know, everything kind of coming together. So it is that visual aspect of it, and then all those other parts that kind of come into the film. So no, that's awesome. I'm glad that at least people are kind of acknowledging your work as well, and a bit more in the industry, and kind of, you know, realizing that fact. Um, I always like to kind of get a bit of a debrief on kind of where people started, and kind of how do you get to that certain role that you're in at the moment. So maybe take me back a little bit. You know, you mentioned growing up in Montreal. So did you know that you always wanted to kind of do this, and how did you kind of get to the spot where you are at the moment?
You know, it's everyone is different, but not really. I think there's sort of, someone once told me there's sort of 5 or 6 stories in the world that are all the same, and if I've quoted that incorrectly, then you know, shame on me. But there's sort of the same fabric. There's the same story that occurs, whether, you know, you're doing makeup or costume or production design. And I think we all do sort of have a yearning, if you're a little bit of a misfit, or an outcast, or an eccentric, or a proud child, or just people who don't necessarily fit in. I'm working with the wonderful Ruth Nega right now. We were talking about this. I mean, she's from Ireland, of you know, part Ethiopian. You know, so here's somebody whose father was Ethiopian, her mom's Irish. She grew up in Ireland in a small town, and here I am, the son of people who came from the UK, from Scotland. So, I mean, I think our upbringings are actually similar, but not similar. Is how do we share these similar upbringings? You know, people in Australia, you know, my father's younger sister is in Perth. So do we have a similar, what do we share? I think it's people who want to do something creatively that don't necessarily fit into 9 to 5, or apply for a job like a draper's assistant and move up the ladder, so to speak. For me, it was a question of, there was nowhere to really study. At first, I thought, do I go to drama school? Do I go to film school? Film school's entirely, and still is, about being a director, writer, or a cinematographer. And it always has been, and always will be. Art school is about being a painter or sculptor. And what I do is not really, it's different. It's a craft, it's a discipline. So I think it was a very hard start, because no one knew, certainly no guidance counselor in school knew what to tell me.
Yeah.
The way they could, how would you like to be, I don't know, a nurse or a teacher, or,
Yeah.
you know. So really for me, it was finding it out myself, figuring it out. And that was volunteer, go work for a school production, go work at, you know, they had all those operatic societies, which were actually, in retrospect, pretty brilliant, because you run into all the misfits, and all kinds of people, like this old lady called Beryl, I hope I get her name right, funny old English lady who got trained at the Albert Hall as an actress, who knew makeup, and she sort of helped me, and she, I guess, had some kind of delusions of grandeur, of, you know, in some Montreal YMCA doing theater and Gilbert and Sullivan operettas, and helped me. And, you know, photographers and people who wanted to, you know, all kinds of people who would then help each other. And it was great fun. And then I met people in England and went to New York, and, you know, I think it's birds of a feather. You meet people who are like-minded all over the place, wherever your travels take you, and you wait tables and work in funny shops and do all kinds of jobs to make your way.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, yeah, even what you mentioned about growing up in different parts of the world. And I know for myself, like, if you, even if you're growing up in Australia, although we do have a quite a, kind of blooming, I guess, film industry, a lot of things that are being shot in Australia. But I think a lot of people still get that sense like, okay, Hollywood is over there. Like, and I'm in this place that dream can't be real for me to actually go there and make it.
Yeah.
We do love it. So it's interesting. Like, did you sort of feel that growing up as well, that it was kind of out of reach for you?
Well, I do and I don't, because I think there's many parallels and similarities between Australia and certainly Canada, and I would say New Zealand, and similar. The similarities are there. Certainly, I grew up where the Canadian film and television industry was much stronger than it is today. That's a fact. Our proximity to the U.S. was also a little bit of the demise of the Canadian industry, where I think the Australian film and television industry was able to be stronger. And I grew up in a lot of it, because when I started in film and television in Canada, we really looked to Australia as a sort of beacon, because you had things like My Brilliant Career and Judi Davis, who was a great big star actually at the time. Australia, way before Kate Blanchett, way before. People forget, you see, in their own histories collectively, people like Sam Neill and great designers, makeup designers, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. There were things being, Gallipoli, come on, these were, great filmmakers being made in Australia. There was a wonderful co-production made actually in Canada. Oh gosh, The Black Robe.
Oh yeah,
Is an Australian-Canadian co-production, and it's a remarkable film. So that was what I looked towards. I didn't feel a great need to be Hollywood.
yeah.
I did realize eventually you have to break through. I get the way a lot of Canadians used to go to London.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a real shift. I'm sure Australians did the same. Then it became, no, you had to go to LA.
Yeah.
And I think in Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver eventually went to LA and New York rather than London.
Yeah.
Have a shift in accent with Canadian actors. We have what we called Canadian actors who started affecting a mid-Atlantic accent, like Christopher Plummer.
Yeah.
And then it shifted and everybody became very American and started speaking much more American. And that's kind of what happened. And the industry were basically American films shooting in Canada, which I profited from, as people in Australia have with, X-Men and all those films.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Was there a certain point, I guess, coming up and kind of trying to break into the industry? What was sort of the breaking point, of where did you kind of get your break? Do you think that you kind of got started on that path?
Well, when I was still very young, I was very lucky that there was a television kind of miniseries made by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation and I guess it was Disney, a co-production, Anne of Green Gables, and it was a hugely successful all over the world. I mean, it was bigger than Hockey Night in Canada. I mean, that's huge.
That's huge. That is huge.
And I think it was bigger than the Stanley Cup playoffs. So that gave me a really good foray into, could I do this work and was I good? Because when you're starting out, you always really need to believe, because you never know yourself, are you any good? And then I thought, well, they tested me, because back then they actually used to test the artists before they did the work. And it was a wonderful woman, Shauna Jabor. It's quite a good makeup designer. And she tested a bunch of people, and I was one of them. And she thought I was good and put me on the crowd and brought me forward and moved me up subsequently. And then I got to work on the fly. And not that I was a prosthetics makeup artist, but somebody said, you should try this guy out. And I was 20 years old. And I got to work on the fly as a sort of assistant, working under Stéphane Dupuis and Chris Wallace, and doing the application on Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
I really was very junior. I had to help put the hands on the feet of this huge, very elaborate 6-hour makeup, and wash the suit, the big foam prosthetic suit at the end of the night, and get coffees and things like that. But that's really the breakthrough for me, was
Yeah.
that film.
And it's an amazing film as well. A classic, I guess. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
It was huge. For me, it was huge. It won an Academy Award for makeup, one of the first in the makeup category. And it changed my life. They thanked me, on the award ceremony. So people hearing that gave me this sort of, my auntie in Perth, Australia heard it.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
so everyone all over the world heard it. And I think that gave me this, like, people rang my mom and dad, people, oh my God. And then I became legitimate.
Yeah, that's what you need. Yeah, I guess that's what you need. That's awesome. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
maybe explain to me a little bit. I guess the difference between working on prosthetics, and the makeup and creation of that versus just, I guess, straight kind of makeup on films. I guess your involvement more recently is also breaking into the prosthetics part of it. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, it's funny because I moved away from it. I thought my initial interest had been because of The Fly, and I've been involved in the prosthetics department as a junior assistant. And I was so in awe of what Stéphane Dupuis and Margaret Becerra, people who are still working in the industry after 40 years,
Mm.
remarkable artists. David Cronenberg's film, this Academy Award they won, I was part of this. But I also recognized there was a lot of limitations in that,
Mm.
because the next jobs coming up, um, there was no work for me. And a job had come up, and someone said, "What about that Mowat kid?" And it was The Believers for John Schlesinger. And it was back to Shauna Jabor, the head makeup designer. And they said, no, he can do it. It was a straight makeup. I don't love the term, but they said, no, get him in. And they said, he can do it. He can do all that makeup. But a lot of the prosthetics people would not have been hired. And I realized at 22 or 23, you need to be able to do more of that than the prosthetics in order to pay your rent.
Right. Mm.
And I quickly realized, if you're going to do prosthetics, now I'll get very in trouble for this, but I will say it. If you're going to do the prosthetics, you really have to be pretty genius. You
Mm.
have to be at that level. And fewer films needed it at that time. It's cyclical. But also, I think that the straight makeup and just good film makeup is very undervalued and underrated. It's more difficult than people know.
Yeah.
I think that I decided that I was good at it. And people said, it is very important to make it look like no makeup. And I decided I was going to be very good at that.
Yeah. Yeah. Choosing your way. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah. And I moved away, and I didn't go near a prosthetic type film for a very long time, and then came back into it. But I still do never really sell myself. I work a lot with Lube Larson and Eva von Bar work with me. I have different people who I collaborate with,
Mm.
like on Dune, part 1 and 2. But I do think that you kind of find the area that you can either work overall in and be I think I'm good with character makeups.
Yeah.
I think to say I'm a prosthetic makeup artist is a very specific. Kazu is, Arjun, Kazu, these guys are top drawer, top.
Yeah.
But I think that that's great. But I think it's limiting as far as what you're going to be able to work on.
Yeah. Right.
And, I like to move around a little bit.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Take me through, I guess, obviously looking at your filmography, your credits. I mean, it's probably, I think you've probably worked on some of my favorite movies of all time. Like, I'm talking about, like, Dune, Blade Runner, Prisoners. A lot of it does tie back to Denis.
Yeah.
Take me back to maybe how that relationship got started. I did hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was it Roger Deakins that introduced you to Denis Villeneuve?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, talk about sort of lucky and fortuitous, just everything timed out. I worked with amazing, lovely Roger and his wife, James. I mean, it's not just Roger. It
Right.
really, he is the cinematographer, the shooter, but it's James as well. And the whole team, it's Team Deakins. But working with them on Skyfall, and then they really recommended me to Denis on for Prisoners, because they'd already, I think there was maybe other people being looked at. And so I had a conversation with Denis on the phone. Both of us he's from rural Quebec, I'm from Montreal. We had a conversation on the phone. I was in Los Angeles where I live, and I think we were put on the phone. He was maybe in Atlanta, prepping Prisoners. And we had a nice conversation. It was very nice. And I think he hired me. I think he did.
I think it happened.
It was one of those things. And next thing, and we spoke in English, but then in the end we spoke French, and he said, "Oh my God." And it was one of those interesting things that we spoke in French a little bit, that he felt very comfortable. At that time, I think he liked speaking French more because that was his first film in the United States.
Correct. Yeah.
And it was really a change in my life working on that film.
Yeah, massive. And what a film as well. Like it's probably one of my favorites. Not just because Hugh Jackman's in it, and we do love him down here in Australia, but such an amazing, like, dark, sort of story to tell, and the actors and the cinematography and the way it was told, like, it was just amazing. What was that experience like, I guess, working? And you've worked with Jake Gyllenhaal before that, prior to that film, or was that the first time?
No, first time. So I was going to look after everybody, basically. Hugh had lovely Pamela Westmore would be working with Hugh. He was, it was great because I knew Hugh I'd met, I think, a little bit before, because I nearly did X-Men but didn't. And Pamela Westmore was coming on board. She would look after Hugh exclusively. That was great for me. I would design all the makeup. Jake, I met Jake. I went to see his play on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the name of it, but it was a very good play. We met. He had been working with another makeup artist. I don't know. Circumstances change. Prison is a smaller film.
Yeah.
It was a smaller film. Denis really doesn't go in for all that stuff, all the personal hair makeup. I've been part of that too, so I'm not criticizing it. Doesn't necessarily work in those types of films. I'd worked with Melissa Leo before on Fighter. I'd worked with Terrence Howard before. I'd worked with Paul Dano before. Yeah. So it really felt like I'm meant to be on this. I got there. Ed McDonald, the producer, I'd worked with, a couple of other people. It was just Renee April, the costume designer. It just was ready. And there we were, and Jake. And it was a phenomenal experience.
Yeah.
It was a glove that fit. It just was perfect.
Yeah.
And as Dark Story, and Maria Bello and I had worked together, everything was perfect.
Yeah. And what's the process like on a film like Prisoners? What's the process in terms of coming up with the looks for those characters? Is it a discussion with Denis prior to shooting, or is it also a collaboration with the actors?
It's very collaborative. I mean, with Denis, it always is. It's collaborative, but also we spent not lots of time, because it wasn't a huge budget film. There wasn't, the months of that. Time is money. But when I got to Atlanta, we basically sat down with here's a draft. Storyboard's very important for him. He said the same storyboard artist. We looked at some things. We had a couple. He sent me some artwork, some visual references. I go back to him with kind of, how about this? What about this? What about that?
Yeah.
And we kind of do it. We did some makeup tests. I met with all the actors. We did a quick run through. I bring him into the makeup trailer to meet all the actors. We do a quick run through, and that was it. And he usually will approve. Occasionally, Paul Dano, because of the beat up makeup, initially we did a makeup, and Denis said, I don't know, I think we need to go further. And that's what he sort of dared me to do. And it was a challenge. I really did not know I was going to be able to pull that off. I needed some help. I needed to call in some people to say, like, call a guy, Mark Neiman, can you build me some more stuff? We're going to do teeth. We're going to do more, because we had that big beat up makeup. This was the time of, I think, Zero Dark 30. There had been I guess, something in the news about torture,
Yeah.
something about prison war. So Denis was sensitive to that. And did we want to go that route? Did Hugh Jackman, did everybody really want that in the film? But we tried. Viola Davis had asked me a couple of times what we would do with Paul Dano. The first makeup test I did, people loved it. I mean, I got the reaction, but like Jake and Viola, everybody kind of looked and went, oh yeah, he looks great.
Mm.
But I kind of felt like I they're not really like, there's no mojo here. I feel like there's no balls to it.
Right. Mm.
Something missing. And so we went back, and then we came back with more oomph to it,
Mm.
which would be just because it only, to be honest, that one big makeup with the big swollen face.
Yeah.
Mark Neiman made some pieces for me. They were generic pieces, actually. He just to have, with cotton in the mouth, and the teeth didn't work. And, we did a few things, but that only played for one day, to be honest with you. And that's all it needed, was one big, like a balloon face moment.
Mm.
In retrospect, when I've seen it one time, I went, it does work. But there was a moment I thought, is it goofy? Is it not? Roger was very encouraging because it's so quick. Had it been longer, I don't think it would have worked.
Right.
I think it was one of those, when Viola pulls that off him. But every actor had a makeup element. Maria, Terrence, certainly Paul Dano, Jake. Jake actually had a lot of makeup elements, and we really worked those out together. And I've worked with Jake almost ever since on many, many films.
Many, yeah. Yeah, Jake's character in that one as well. Like, I know my friends and I always reference how great he looked in that film. I mean, the hairstyle, the little tattoos and things like that, because his character is quite interesting in that film, where it doesn't kind of fit into what you think, a detective would be in that kind of scenario. So he's got a lot of, I think, personal kind of backstory. So I think that look really does complete that. It really does, portray that and give you that sense that he does have that sort of interesting background, sort of mysterious. Yeah.
He's really, I will say this for him, it was he really is the genuine article. All of those actors were incredibly collaborative. Viola agreed. I suggested she have natural hair and not wear a wig, which she had been doing in most of her films.
Mm.
Terrence Howard, I mean, incredible. Paul, all of them. Melissa Leo, aging her just with paint.
Mm.
But Jake, I really think, took that movie. He made that film his. And the backstory, is he a foster kid? Is he a kid who's had this? There's some kind of Slavic or Russian, there was some vibe. And he was the attention to detail, and his cooperation for me was a joy and a pleasure to have an actor, which all of them did. Every single actor in that contributed in a way is rare to find.
Yeah.
And I just give him the gold star for performance, for an undervalued performance, I think an underrated film in general, undervalued performance. He's always, to me, Nightcrawler, Stronger. I don't know, he's also my friend, but I think he's someone over the years, I just go, God, that's somebody who's just, I think, a little bit underrated in our industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think he does definitely deserve more. Take me through to, I guess, working on Blade Runner, kind of following up to that with Denis. How did that come about? And with such a big project like Blade Runner, obviously a lot's on the table. It's a continuation of the story. It hasn't been done for many years. Obviously Denis was a big fan as well. Creating that world and that look for Blade Runner. So kind of what went into that, and what was the process like?
I think Blade Runner was terrifying. When I look back, well, we were all terrified. When they called me, I think I'd gone to Roger and James for dinner one night, and I knew I would be on it, and Denis had spoken to me. And I was on another project in the middle of that with Jake called Stronger. So we were in Boston, and I'd left LA, and I remember being in Boston, and one day I called Denis and I said, Denis, why am I on this project? excuse me, because it was the time where there was a transition where all of the paperwork and photographs and research were all coming now via different programs on computer. And people who know me know that I am the least computer literate person in the world.
You jumped onto the Zoom call perfectly. There was no issues.
Oh,
Yeah, you're doing great.
that's a new thing. I'm pretty good at that. I have an Apple computer, but I'm talking 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Open on Box, open on this, open on that. I was like, the language I would use. And I finally rang Denis and I just thought, why me? Science fiction. And he said, because this is right for you. And it is based in reality. See, that's what I realized. I like work that's got fashion elements and based in reality.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, I will recommend 10 of the best people who would be perfect. Furry ears and fingers and toes. I know some great people who can do that. But for me, no. And Denis knew it was right for me. And
Yeah.
Roger had a long talk about it. And he said, it's all a big fantasy, really. And it is all based in reality. So the more we talked about it, it made sense. But I did say, I'm terrified. And he said, Donald, so am I.
Mm.
And I think it put us all at ease. And there we were, and it could be anything. I said to Roger, should Ryan be clean shaved or have... No, I don't know. And he goes, I don't know. It could be anything. Is he real? Isn't he real? So I think the more you treat it as something that's kind of, is this even happening? And take it as an existential, what is it? Then you get over your bad self and stop being so precious. And don't look at that earlier film and not compare it and just start over. And there we were. And it was incredible. And that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine what a scary task it is to go in there, but I guess it is kind of freeing to not have to, compare it so much to the original as well, because it is such a massive cult hit and, probably one of the best sci-fi films ever made. And, Blade Runner 2049 probably tops that as well. So that's really interesting. I'm interested to know a little bit more about Jared Leto's look in the film, because it's quite iconic and his performance was really, really amazing. What was that process like in kind of creating that character for him?
Jared, I really like him very much. He's got some similarities to Jake, but there is a point where Jared can also take a lot of energy too. What we did discuss was blind contact lenses. It would not be a VFX.
Yeah.
Talked about it. Here's the problem. And I hate to say problem, but it was a challenge. Jared was in Los Angeles. We were already shooting in Budapest. I would say this is the biggest obstacle for what I do, and anybody listening, for people who deal with people rather than building a set, or is having to deal with the time difference, as you have to deal with all the time. Is there I'm in Budapest. I'm running this huge project. We finish the day. I get back to the hotel. It's, 9 o'clock at night, whatever it is. I then have to speak with Jared, and the semantics of getting him into where he is in Los Angeles to the person who does the eye contact lens exam, the doctor, the eye fitting, all of these things. I'm just going to turn that phone off. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I'm the last person in Christendom with a landline. So I felt like it was so complicated because he would be arriving, but the lenses would have to be hand painted by Christina Patterson, who's one of the very few painters. And, these are the little details of things that are very complicated to do. We originally talked about him being bald.
Okay.
Therefore, I had to have one of my guys, Jason Collins, do a life cast of him in Los Angeles. All of this took manpower, time, money, budget, and at the very last minute, Denis decided, we did a quick test in Budapest when he arrived. Bald cap, no bald cap, and everyone said no bald cap. But this is what happens when you have no prep. And it, for me, is why makeup artists and hair and costume designers, why we go through what we go through. And most of us, when you meet us, lose our minds and appear on all these shows looking like the cat dragged us in, because we're always in a state of utter despair and neuroses because you've just spent hours canceling, making appointments. And Jared really said to me, Donald, I have to be blind. I cannot see anybody.
Yeah.
And he meant it. So we had to walk him to the set. We piggybacked. We put 2 sets of lenses in. It was tricky. It was very hard. He's a lovely person. He's a very gifted actor, but he does take it from you. And you've got to devote yourself to everything he needs. So we did him, some stippling and wrinkling around his eyes to indicate some scarring, and then this piece that went on the back of his neck, if I recall, that lights up. That in itself, it was relatively low tech but practical, and even that took a minute. But we had very little time to come up with all of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes those things work out really well, but there's a price to be paid. And I worked subsequently, and I said, Jared, you make me crazy, but I'll work with you anytime. So that's how it went.
Yeah, nice. What's the process like when you are working on makeup for someone in terms of the actual physical work, the time it takes? What's that like? And I guess you're always on set as well, just to be there to, yeah.
I'm very much a set person. So if I'm running the department, designing it, particularly, on Blade Runner, I did not design the hair, which I regret because it was not my happiest time. I think that I have this thing that when I'm in charge of, which I was in charge of the hair makeup, but I bring people in, and it's I'm not, discrediting anybody, but when I choose the people to do the hair, or do different jobs, if I'm not hands-on and something goes wrong or Denis not happy, I'm responsible.
Right.
And sometimes those people don't realize. And I think what I've learned in my wisdom, my only sort of pearl of wisdom now is, if I'm going to run it, I need to run it all. And I think that's what I learned on Dune Part 1 was run it your way and hire the right people. Sometimes you don't. And I think anyone listening who's running anything, I think I've been very hard on myself these past few years, but I don't think I run things as well as I should because I'm much nicer than I ought to be. And I need to get to be a little bit, what's that word? A little bit harder at being able to fire people or what, you understand what I'm saying. Sometimes you have to be able to say, I can't be nice about this because you're screwing me up.
Yeah. You're too nice, Donald. Yeah. You need to,
I am. Can I tell you that? No, it's not putting the foot down, because if you let it go, you're a putz. You are really a softie, and people take advantage.
Yeah.
It took me nearly 60 years to learn that. So moving forward, I'd be very cautious. I think you learn a lot. By the time you get to these types of films, there's a lot at stake.
For sure.
You have to put a lot into it, and you also have to stop others who don't have the same thing really invested, if that makes more sense, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The next one, I wanted to, I guess, find out a little bit more. Again, you get to collaborate with Ryan Gosling again on really one of my favorite films as well, First Man, working with Damien Chazelle. So Damien Chazelle is probably one of my favorite directors at the moment, working, and really love his films. What was that project like, and what was it like working with Damien?
It's really interesting. I have a very strange relationship with that film. Look, I hugely admire Damien. I think it's a masterful film. Do people see me, or are they only hearing me here?
They'll see you as well. Yeah.
No. I mean, I think it's important because I do feel like, this transparency in my life. I'd like to tell people because I don't know if it's living here or if it's the business where it's just often people, that's that hashtag of, it's all that synthetic. It's synthetic indignation when people feel it's, but I don't believe that. I feel that if it's transparent, then be transparent. I think Damien makes some very good films. And, First Man, I think, was treated badly. That's my personal opinion. I also think it was a terrible title, is my personal opinion. And a friend told me that because Claire Foy is one of the greatest actresses living. And think that Ryan was great in the film. And Damien did a masterful film. I just couldn't figure out what the fig, like,
Yeah.
and I don't mean what awards. It doesn't matter. That shouldn't matter. Some of the best films, but I couldn't understand. And I do remember this, and I will say this. When I read the script, I thought, ooh, this is depressing. And Ryan had encouraged me to work on the film. And I remember reading it, and I thought, oh, this is not, I mean, I live in America. I mean, this is not their vibe. Because, you don't read very many good scripts to begin with. And I mean that. There's so few, like, where are the great writers? Give them a break. Get them out there. And you read the script and go, oh my gosh, this is something. And it starts on that beat. And you think, okay, but I like a film like that.
Yeah.
And Claire Foy, come on. She is magnificent actress. And it was just a joy. I mean, I really just to work with her. And I really wasn't, at one point, I had been not very well. There was a lot happening in my life. Ryan came to see me and said, come and do the movie. There was some real issues. Was going to Atlanta. Damien, his preparation, superb.
Yeah.
Superb preparation. He's young. There are times, his bedside manner could, there's a few moments you think, come on. And I think this thing of being young, and young people are different sometimes. But Damien, I loved. I thought when he said to me one day, I had asked a question, he said, I defer to you. And I went, excuse me? Are you actually treating me like a professional who's been doing this for 35 years?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, because Denis is the same. Thank you for allowing me to do my job.
Yeah.
I am now, so I think that Mary Zofer is doing the costumes, our production designer, my great friend Paul Lambert doing the practical visual effects were superb.
Yeah.
Lena shooting it was superb. It's not a beautiful movie. They don't correct everybody. They let you have dark circles. And I love that. It's proper cinematic movie making.
Yeah.
But I saw it in the Toronto Film Festival. I had a profound moment. I wept. I actually wrote in a piece that Damien did for the book where I was born in that. I saw that in 1969. I was a child with my sister and my mom and dad at a cottage outside of Montreal in 1969. Everything about the home, the toys, everything, her smoking a cigarette in the back with the screens and everything about it. I thought, oh my God, we've got everything right.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was very disappointing on a lot of levels. And I think that it was unfair, but that's life. And
very underrated. I think I agree with you. And I don't really understand why. But yeah, I just love it. At least we love it, Donald. That's
we do. Ryan did a very, very good job. He was very good. We had some very good actors in that as well. It wasn't Astronauts' Wives. It just had there was something about it. It was very special, and I'm very happy to have been part of it.
the music, the score by Justin Herbert's like amazing. Like his music, I'll just play in the background, from time to time, and yeah, all of it coming together. So yeah, it's a real shame. It's a real shame. Yeah. And then I guess the big one on the cards, working on Dune and Dune
Right.
coming about, and obviously, have you wrapped Dune Part Two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, you probably can't talk too much about it. I know it's a very big project, so
Yeah.
I won't
Yeah.
push that. But let's talk about Dune Part One and what an amazing science fiction film that was. Such a such a big project to work on. The source material, obviously, being huge, and hearing about how much Denis loved it as a kid. Um, Tell me a little bit about how that project came along. And obviously, the look of the film is very interesting. The characters, Stellan Skarsgård. I mean, his whole look in it. Like, what was that process in terms of shaping that film and working on those concepts early on, and how that came about?
I think that initially I felt much more comfortable than I did on Blade Runner. Although in many respects, Blade Runner was harder. I don't know why I feel that. Maybe I'm older, or I've been through a lot. I went through a lot in my life in that period. And we were going back to Budapest, which, I was torn on that. Always some crewing issues, who you can bring, who you can't bring. Um, Doing, I think with Dune Part One, I had some very definitive ideas in my head, what I wanted. And I knew as soon as I met with Denis, the very first day we met to talk about it was here in Santa Monica. We had lunch and we talked right away about the Baron. And I knew how I wanted to do it or proceed and try. And Denis thought of it as because there had been talk of that being a CG character, and Stellan didn't want to do it. It was CG. And we talked about it being a marriage of CG and practical. And I really believed it could be a practical makeup. And again, I don't sell myself as really a prosthetics makeup man. And I'm not Rick Baker, and I'm not this, and I'm not. But at the same time, I knew that there was a way to do this if we did it properly and I had the right team in place. So I'd said to him, I think I need my guy, Lube Larson, who's worked with me quite a lot. I think if I have him on board, we can start talking about it. So Denis was open to it, that we would treat this as an experiment, because we had a long prep, a long leeway to look at it as a practical makeup, being a fat suit, because fat is funny. We weren't fat shaming. We didn't want to turn it in. Of course, now, look, you've got the whale.
Wow.
I mean, very impressive. But at the time, it had not been done. I feel we sort of led the way in bringing back a practical makeup. And Louve and I started talking about, Marlon Brando, Island of Dr. Moreau, Apocalypse Now, of making it sinister and not funny. How to do Stellan and kind of create this sort of camp, Cardinal Richelieu character, and then the Harkonnen and Dave Bautista, and then bringing all these characters in. And, Denis was very good. The first pass at the Baron, not good. It just didn't, because he was too skinny with this sort of big belly, but it had to be immense, bear-like and gorilla-like. And once I had that in my head, we were able to go further. And we had an impressive prep time, I will say. And Denis was brilliantly let us alone every week for 16 weeks. We sent pictures. And, Louve and Ava and the entire team in Sweden were really given a wide berth while I was prepping and shooting the movie. And that's how people should make movies.
Yeah.
And we do what we do. Part two was very different. And we'll talk about that one day. It wasn't the same experience at all. And crewing was very hard. So I think part one was just a brilliant experience for me. And those actors, incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible.
for sure.
Yeah, but everything about Dune, I mean, Timmy and Rebecca and all of the people that came in, also because people want to work with Denis Villeneuve, there's none of that. I won't do this, and I'm not doing that to my hair, and I'm not wearing that makeup. There's none of that nonsense, and that's something that's really taken over this industry that makes me very cross,
Yeah.
and it's just makes me want to leave the business when I hear people, friends of mine, tell me, "Oh, we're doing this, and so and so won't do this, and they won't cut their hair, and they won't." It's so exhausting,
Yeah.
so exhausting.
I can imagine. I can imagine. What is so maybe going off of that, like what are some of the bigger challenges in what you do and kind of what you found across the years?
Well, I think when you get not spoiled, when you get to do your work, you get to do your work. I get to do mine. When you, I think something slipped in what I do in the world of makeup and hair and when there's something's happened. I tell, Jake and I are working together right now, which is really lovely that I've had to move over into TV like everybody. That was a tough pill for me to swallow. I got to say, anybody listening, I'm not a snob. I mean, but wasn't the easiest thing to say, okay, but I know TV is good and it's improved, but
Yeah.
I made my career making feature films for most of my life, and there's some new training and well, lack thereof. People don't get trained the way we did. People have funny attitudes. I have a stand-in that, I've asked a stand-in, I can't even say it because I'll be in so much trouble. I've had so much in the world of HR now where anything you say may and will be used against you. You cannot comment.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. How do you work the way you want to work and correct those things or set the right standard? Yeah.
I said the other day reminds me of a film I made years ago with Tony Hopkins. But I was saying the other day very proudly to someone that I've been working in this industry when nobody told me anything. I hired people from the beginning of my career who were LGBTQ plus, trans, and women, and people who were unemployable, and nobody told me to do it. And it never felt important. And I didn't have to hashtag anything. I just was the right thing to do. And we were discriminated against, and there were problems, but we also knew what was wrong and what was right. And we didn't, as far as I was concerned, the problem with the business were always the people who were running it, not us. The people who were perpetrating all of these problems were not us, it was them. So assigning this amount of forms that I get, that I sign, are not for us, it's for them. Casting, all of this stuff. But we were thinking about it. The person who does Will Smith's makeup used to work for me as my second. I gave her first jobs. The first person, one of the first trans people working in Toronto was working for me. We always had LGBTQ plus. I don't know. I've been a mentor. I've worked with Indigenous people in Canada. I worked with people with AIDS. I made one of the first documentary films about, was called Talking About AIDS, at the very height of the crisis. No one had to tell us. So here I am in 2023, almost 60 years old, going, what the am I told? You know what I mean? It's so kind of great. I'm working with a young woman right now who's 19. She's on a scholarship at USC that I mentored at high school. She wants to be a director. I'm working with a young man who wants to do makeup, who's done a program. I mean, I just think we're in a synthetic indignation all around, except the people like me and a number of other people. So the business has changed, that PAs are now everybody, there's no hierarchy. Everybody's equal. They're equal in a synthetic indignation level, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the business has changed in a way that, yes, I love that there's casting has changed and we're seeing a broader spectrum of people on camera. But at the same time, the quality of the work, I think, is suffering. The fact that you can't mentor in a way that when I was a young man working for John Schlesinger, that somebody couldn't say to me, get out of the way, you're blocking lighting.
Right.
Don't ever call that person that. I remember on 8 Mile, Eminem is always called by his proper name, which is Marshall.
Marshall.
Somebody kept saying Eminem, Eminem, Eminem. And he finally said, stop with the big F word, calling me Eminem.
Yeah.
So, pardon me, I'm not worth that.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm getting at is we've lost the plot in some respects.
Yeah.
And I think the eccentricity, what made us the business a great place for people to work and learn and respect, because we really did have some respect for each other, and we cared about our peers and called each other, and we looked after people during the AIDS crisis, and Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS. I was part of the Actors Fund, where we wrote checks for people who were losing their home. We're not doing that anymore. We're not really doing that. We're doing other things that seem to look good, but it's not.
It's synthetic in a way, as you say, that it's not legitimate. Yeah, and it's probably hard to speak about as well. So I can appreciate, your commentary on it as well. I'm sure it's tough. Yeah,
it's very difficult because of censure and people who you really would love to hear from. I mean, one year I did something for Australian Film Academy. I was really happy to be. I thought it was great that they were asking people from outside to be part of Australian Film Academy Awards and looking at films. Because I've loved Australian films my whole life, and then I thought, I think that's great when you share. But there is a sense that there's a dialogue that's missing, that we're not having right now because of that censure, and we're only hearing from certain people who seem to have the podium.
Yeah,
and it's not us. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a tough one. Yeah, it's a tough issue that's going around. Talk to me a little bit about and I promise I'll wrap it up very soon. But talk to me a little bit about back to Dune, and I guess working with the younger generation of actors like Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya. What was it like working with them, and kind of where do you see their kind of careers kind of going? And the question I'm trying to ask is, what's the kind of difference with the new generation of actors coming through? And obviously you worked with so many different actors across the past, Daniel Craig, so many projects, and Jake and everything like that. So do you see a bit of a difference between like a new generation coming into the film industry at the moment?
Well, I'm really impressed with, Austin Butler. In Dune Part 2, wait till you see him.
Yeah.
This was enough. Elvis, incredible. But I think, for me, it's really interesting. Zendaya is I got to know her a lot better on Part 2 than I did from Part 1, was much smaller. They're very impressive. They're also very powerful. Timmy is a force, to be reckoned with. He's very talented. He is a leading man. He is a star. It's a friend of mine said that I really respect, who's been out of the business for a long time, a great actor, really a gifted actor, said, you only see that every 20, 25 years. And he really is one of them.
Some might say he's the modern day Leonardo DiCaprio.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Similar path, right?
No, there is no question in my mind, and he admires him greatly. But there's no question in my mind. Timmy, from the moment I met him, and Zendaya, absolutely. Timmy is special. And I have a really connection to him. But he is impressive. His calm, his ability, his control is really special. It's very impressive. I was immediately from Dune, having seen his Call Me by Your Name, but to see he's very intelligent, It's very impressive, and you don't see that very often.
Mm.
Austin, same thing, because we did a 3-hour makeup on him for Dune Part 2.
Right.
So, again, very impressive. But Timmy, there's that whole Florence Pugh, very impressive.
Yeah.
Very, see her behind you there.
That's
Very, I mean, she's given me this gold bracelet. I never wore a bracelet my entire life. I'm not a jewelry man, but this little bracelet she gave me,
lovely.
she said, to keep us connected. They're different. They're different than I don't want to say the old timers, but I will say this in all fairness. Then there's the Daniel Craigs, but they have something the others have to listen and watch, because they have a quality, movie star, actor quality, but they also have a different manner. And I think that they do have to take a few lessons. I'm not critiquing, I'm not suggesting.
No.
But there's a warmth. Daniel Craig has a quality. Maybe because he didn't become famous till he was a little bit older.
Yep.
His mom was a wonderful art teacher from Liverpool. My dad was a head teacher from Stirling in Scotland. His dad ran a pub. Maybe we have more closer similarities.
Yeah.
I think, Daniel is someone who, I don't know, there's things about him. One day he heard me talking about the name Mowat and how in Scotland they call it Mowat. They pronounce it. And he said, "Oh, what's your tartan like?" And I said, "Oh, it's kind of blue and green and yellow. It's not, And a couple days later, he walked in, under his arm was a big Mowat tartan blanket.
Wow.
The young ones wouldn't do that today. It's not that it's just they don't think the way. So Daniel has Javier Bardem. I mean, he's a brilliant actor. He's Penelope. I mean, just the way they are, the way they behave, they know how to make you feel very good.
Yeah.
So I think there's something generationally. It's the same, just the way they are. So
yeah.
There's something I like. A couple of years ago, I said to my agent, I just want to work with young people. I've had just the most amazing experience with Amanda Stenberg and Zendaya and Timmy and Florence Pugh. But then recently I sort of changed my mind. Not that I wouldn't work with them, because I would, but there is something really nice, because those other ones always remember your birthday.
Right.
Right? They always do. They always remember Christmas. When my father died, Daniel made sure he got in touch. Jake Gyllenhaal would get in touch. When I got nominated, Rebecca Ferguson got in touch with me. They're more.
Yeah.
It's just a different thing.
Yeah.
The younger ones are preoccupied in a different world.
Yeah.
And it's not a criticism. It's merely their worlds are very different from mine.
Yeah. It's an observation, I guess, of the generational differences. Yeah.
Yeah. But the quality of acting, I mean, I cannot, they're so good. I mean, when you look at the work and certainly what Timmy does, Florence Pugh, I mean, just this year to watch her in, what's the name of the film where the kid is starving? What's that called? Oh my God, I've lost my mind. Don't Worry, Darling.
Don't Worry, Darling. Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
She's gotten 3 different films. And then for us to have her in Dune Part 2, she's glorious. She's a delight to make her up.
Yeah.
She's a delight. Okay. And then I've seen her in 2 other films this year. So, and she's not difficult. There's a lovely quality about all of them.
For sure.
There's a joy. Timmy brings a kind of joy into a room. And that's very special.
No, that's great to hear. It's good to hear that, even off camera, people are still being kind to each other, and, the work environment really positive as well. So it adds to
so many hours together. We spend so many hours together that it's, but Jake, I think the guys who are, I don't know, 40 plus, Ryan. Those guys, I think maybe because we share more similarity, they also had harder, they weren't, Ryan came to LA as a kid, he
Yeah,
did the auditions. They, again, raised in different surroundings.
for sure.
You know,
It shapes a person, really.
I think it does. And there's just something special about it. And I don't know, maybe it is an age thing too. Sometimes you just find yourself suddenly, when I'm with Charlotte Rampling, I mean, there's something about being with her that, because she's that much older than me, it makes me feel it's just a great Chris Walken. I think just a great feeling
Yeah.
to be around. Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna wrap it up with a couple of more kind of speed round questions.
Right.
So just and there could be a few silly ones here as well. So, but we'll start off with just more serious ones for you. Obviously, you work in the industry close to 40 years now, as you mentioned. Are there any particular actors that you could list off the top of your head that you would really absolutely love to work with?
Oh gosh, yeah, there are. But I can never think of them when the time comes.
I know
I
it's
really
an on the
can't.
spot question.
It's really, yeah, it's very on the spot. Gosh, who is there? I'd always wanted to work with the Redgraves. I mean, Vanessa's the only one still going. I,
Mm,
I mean, she's still working. I just to have the experience of one
yeah,
of the Red, Maggie Smith, go on, why not? You know, I think why not? I think some of the new younger people too. There's something kind of fascinating out there. I think people I'm seeing now, Michelle Yeoh, I just think she's so incredible. I'm watching her this year, just from that film. I'd love to work with Michelle Yeoh.
yeah, for sure. And great success with that film as well. It's just yeah, it's amazing, amazing to see.
Yeah, and just because I love, and the Irish film this year, The Quiet Girl, has been sort of a film I've been really uh, sort of championing that film. That I think anything to do with those films to me are so beautiful. They make me want to go back and do a small film like that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Is there any particular project that you would love to work on? Either if it's, let's say, a remake potentially of a certain project or a film that you really loved in the past, or is anything that's yeah,
I've been watching. I'm really a sucker for things like Upstairs, Downstairs, and old British television because it's so current.
yeah,
Things to First World War. Uh, they could never remake Gallipoli or anything like that, but anything really World War One. I mean, they've done 1917 and now All Quiet on the Western Front, which is.
phenomenal. Mm,
But I think I'm very interested in that. I like things that are current that I'd want to watch, I guess. Oh, I don't know. I'm kind of I like biographies as well. I'll tell you the one, A Girl from the North Country, which was on Broadway with all the Bob Dylan music. I'd kind of love to work on that.
that would be
That's
cool. Mm,
that's a done 1930s style.
yeah,
That appeal to me. I love the 30s as well.
mm,
The look of it, I think aesthetically is very interesting.
yeah, for sure. No, I like that. And final one, this one's from my partner. She's just wondering, obviously because you're a Academy Award nominated makeup artist and you've worked so long in the industry, any specific makeup tips for my partner for, getting out of bed in the morning? What's something that she could just work on, any sort of tip for her?
Well, you know what? I think all beauty, if it's about beauty, it's all about skin. And if it's all about skin, I think it's to look great because, just look after your skin. Look how
Mm,
makeup is I love makeup because you can do so much with it. But to do makeup for the sake of makeup, it's, an extension of whatever. But actually, it's also, it's just looking good. You want to feel good and look good. And believe me, your health and it's an extension of that, I think. As you get older, you really relish and cherish the fact that you have your health.
mm,
And when you have good skin and you look, because you can spot it when somebody looks healthy and they glow. That's what you're always trying to recreate with makeup.
Mm,
So I just think, look after your skin. The first thing you should do in the morning, your routine should be washing your face, looking great, and having a healthy, glowy complexion.
perfect. I love that.
Yeah.
Look after your skin.
Yeah. That's the best makeup. And then whatever makeup you love is, you know, if you like warm colors, use warm colors. If you like cool, do cool. But it should be an extension of something you love. If your favorite color is, incorporate that.
For sure. For sure. Great. Well, Donald, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and get to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Where can people kind of find you? Are you pretty active on social media and things like that?
Well, I'm trying to be, because I feel like I'm doing something for the Powder Group for Oscar Sunday with great colleagues of mine, V. Neal. We're doing something for that's on the Powder Group this Sunday. I'm on social media, Instagram. What is it, Mowat Donald or Donald Mowat? I don't even know. I'm really trying to be more active.
Yeah.
As I approach the big 6-0, because it's good, it's important, and I do a lot of mentoring and work with film schools and Northampton and in the UK, and I mentored some students here in Los Angeles, and so yeah, they can find me on Facebook as well.
Great. We'll put up the social channels, and then if you'd like, follow the socials.
April 21st. Well, I'm working the Oscars with, I don't know if you've seen the Indian film RRR.
No, I don't. I haven't. No.
Amazing. Yeah, it's re-releasing, but I'm working with the best song artists. It's called Natu Natu, because I love Indian films.
Okay.
So I'm working for the best song this Sunday. And yeah, and I've got a film opening, Guy Ritchie's film, The Covenant's opening on April 21st.
Awesome.
With Jake Gyllenhaal and Dar Salim. And that's an important film. It really is an important film about translators from the conflict. So that's April 21st opening.
Perfect. Yeah, check it out if you haven't seen it yet. No, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Donald. We'll put your socials on the podcast, and
You know what will you do with this? When would that be?
We should air in about a week's time, so I'll share it with you, and then
I'll post it. If you have any questions, let me know.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, Donald. Thank you for your time. I know you're probably a very busy man.
It's Saturday. Not that busy. It's yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming. Hopefully we can speak again. Perhaps when Dune Part 2 comes out.
Okay. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.